24th of March 2000. The General Manager, Pittwater Council. Re the naming of streets in the Winnererremy Bay Parkland Estate subdivision. Dear Mr Gordon, I request that you consider naming one of the streets in question after my father, Mr Joseph James Homer, Sr., who came to live in Mona Street, Mona Vale, with his wife and 10 children in 1936, where he owned a dairy farm and soon bought extra land in Bassett Street to extend the farm. This land was later subdivided by Landcom and now contains 95 homes, several streets and a park. This is opposite Winnererremy Bay Parkland Estate. Soon after arriving at Mona Street, he also purchased 5 blocks of land on what is now Winnererremy Bay Parkland, which contained 3 homes, one of which I lived in with my husband and 5 children for 18 years. The council put a resumption order on all the land in that area. We tried desperately to save it, as that was my father's dying wish. He died in 1966, and we were forced off our land in April 1968. I was the last resident of Winnererremy Bay. This, in my opinion, was a grave injustice, considering our land was resumed for private enterprise, which after 32 years never eventuated. It is for this reason I feel this wish should be granted, in honour of my father, for the sake of his children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. Joseph Homer was a wonderful man and a great help to many people in the Mona Vale community. P.S. I also enclose a photo of my late father on the dairy with his favourite cow. Yours sincerely, Dorothy Hawkins.
And my father had intended to retire from dairies. He had dairies all his life, and when he was 17 he had his first one at Ashfield. Well, in 1936 my father bought a dairy in Mona Vale. It was just a small dairy, and my brother, who was 12 years of age, came first to learn some of the run. We came about a fortnight later, and the day I arrived at Mona Vale, my brother Archie took me by the hand and we ran across to look at Mona Vale Beach. It was my first sight of Mona Vale Beach. And as we ran over the hill, we saw about 2 inches of the tops of a paling fence, because the sand would blow across and cover everything. But as we ran across, there were about 4 little cottages, weekend cottages, and they were almost covered with beach sand. I understand that the people who owned them used to have to bring a shovel with them when they came to stay the weekend, and they had to dig the sand away from the doors and windows to be able to get in for the weekend. My father donated money towards a surf boat, and it was called June Homer, after my younger sister. She was 18 years of age and a very lovely girl. Yes, there was just one little cottage in Mona Street.
This little one here.
And years later, my father bought the rest of the land there, and we moved up on the hill, and we had a two houses on the hill and the one down low. And in the wartime, the soldiers came and they camped all over Mona Vale headland, and there was a camp in the bottom of our property. And the soldiers used to come up to see us up on the higher ground, and they had a gramophone. It was a portable one, and they only had 3 records. But we had a gramophone which had been, the machine part had been taken for repair. But we had 100 records. So the soldiers used to come up at night with the excuse that they were getting milk for the officers' coffee. And we would play the records and dance to the music.
Well, they had a lot of excuses. They wanted to dance with the pretty young girls too.
So my mother was there and she kept an eye on us and made sure we were all well behaved. And we thoroughly enjoyed having the soldiers come. And we used to go to a dance hall at Mona Vale and dance there. And all the soldiers, of course, would come. But one night there was a big fight between the soldiers and the police were called, and we were all directed to go home. So the dance was cancelled for the night. The dancing and all was just wonderful.
And what building would that have been? Do you recall?
Yes, it was Mona Vale Hall on the main road at Mona Vale, near where the New South Wales Bank was.
Now, this picture you're painting of the war, you're talking about going to dances and what have you, and I was absolutely tickled to hear you mention that you used to go dancing with my Auntie Joyce.
That's right, yes. She used to be dancing there with Mary Boots, and there were 2 men that helped to teach everybody how to dance, and we would dance behind each other in rows and follow each other and do the same steps, and we learned to be very good dancers after a while.
And what would you dance? What dances?
The Pride of Erin, the jazz waltz.
Did you do the progressive bar dance?
Oh, of course, yes. And
Did you do a quick step?
Destiny and Maxina and the quick step and foxtrot, all the dances, all the ballroom dances, and it was absolutely wonderful.
So were your partners mainly soldiers or local boys or what?
Well, there were a lot of local boys, but there were a lot of soldiers too. On Mona Street there was the first little dairy, and after a while my father learned that some of the cows, although he had bought them, didn't really belong, and the people, several people had cows and they put them to the dairy to be milked, and they would come and get whatever milk they wanted, because the cows were theirs.
So you milk the cows and then the milk has to be delivered?
Yes, it was delivered by horse and cart. All milk was delivered twice a day.
No refrigeration?
No refrigeration. But many years later, Dad was serving Mr. Hallstrom at Roseville, and he said to my father, "You won't be able to give us any more milk because we can't afford it now." And Dad said, "Of course you can." He said, "I know what it's like to have a family." And he said, "You put your billy out and I'll put the milk in it every day." So that is what he did. And many years later, Mr. Hallstrom contacted my father and asked him to come to his factory because he had developed the silent night refrigerators. So when Dad went to see him, he said, "You're entitled to whichever one of these refrigerators that you prefer." And so my father got a refrigerator for nothing.
That would have been a big deal,
Yes,
getting a fridge.
it was good.
And
Yes,
Dorothy, was that Sir Edward Hallstrom who did that?
that was, yes.
So he was a well-liked man around the place?
Yes, but he moved from Roseville to DY and he worked on the roads, digging, pick and shovel. And that's when he invented the fridges. So he became more famous, and also he went and took care of the zoo, and
He was a friend of your father's, wasn't he?
yes, he was. And
He
he
used to
came.
come to the dairy.
He came one time, and we showed him the koalas that were in our place, and we used to put bread and butter pieces down at the bottom of the trees, and the koalas would come and eat the bread.
I've never heard of such a thing. That's amazing.
Really?
So
Well,
this is along near the house in Bassett Street,
On the dairy.
on the
top.
dairy. Isn't that lovely?
And the bottom. And the bottom. Yeah.
And in 1938 there was a very bad fire, went right through the hills and burnt out lots and lots of places.
Right out to Avalon, didn't it?
Yes, and it more or less finished all the koalas. They all moved further and further out, and they were mostly only seen around Avalon after that. My mother and father were in bed, and my mother woke up to hear the pounding of somebody walking through the house. So she shook my father and said, "Come on, Joe, there's someone in the house, there's a burglar." And he didn't want to get up, because he had to get up early in the morning anyway. And anyway, she finally got him up, and he went walking through the house. And in the laundry, my mother had left a tub of half full of blue water, and the koala was there, and it wasn't a man, it was a koala, and he was drinking the blue water from the tub.
How many children in your family, Mum?
There were 10 children in the family, 6 girls and 4 boys. And
The boys all worked on the dairy, didn't they?
yeah, I worked on the dairy too. I used to make the beds and then I'd go out the back and wash the milk cans and separate the milk and the cream and wash down the bales, which were just 4 concrete bales, and keep everything clean. And I would use a scythe and cut the oats that were growing in the field. So I was kept busy.
So when did you start working in the dairy and doing all that bed, or making the beds and cleaning out the dairy and cutting the oats?
Well, when I was first went there, when I was 14.
When you were 14. So did you continue your schooling there? No schooling at all?
No, because it was in between. You didn't go back to school, did you?
I didn't go back to school. I could have left school at 15, and it was 12 days before I turned 15 that I arrived there, and there was a bus that went to Manly High School, and I'd have to be gone by a certain time. It didn't work out, and my father said, well, it's only another 12 days and you might as well stop working, stop school and be done with it.
So Dorothy, you're 14, 15, and you're having to work pretty hard.
Yes.
I mean, you didn't resent that.
No, I didn't. I had somebody come and see me years later, and they said, I've never seen a little girl work as hard as you did. But I didn't feel it was hard work, and I loved it, and I sang all the time. And
You used to make all the breakfast for the workers, didn't you? For the men?
well, later on, when I got married, my father needed someone to feed the men, so I moved to one of the top houses, and my husband and I cooked their meals for them, and they would come up for breakfast, lunch and dinner at night.
On a fuel stove?
Yes, on the fuel stove.
Did the men chop the wood for you, or did you have to chop
No.
the wood? It's a funny thing, that. The men like the food, but they don't like chopping the wood.
Yeah. And you used to make a sponge with jam and cream and take it down.
Yes,
to
every day I used to walk down, right away down the farm to wherever the men were working in the field, and take a cup of tea and a nice fresh cooked sponge.
But with cream in it, no doubt.
Yeah,
With fresh cream, it'd be hard
you
to
should
beat.
have been there, Tim.
You're taking it there now.
Yeah. And the Stinson used to fly over at that time, didn't it?
Yes, the Stinson used to come across when I was taking the cups of tea down for them, and one day it didn't come, and I noticed it didn't come, but everybody said it had passed over, and it wasn't true.
You were just aware that this Stinson went over at the same time every day.
It's news,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
She
Big
used to
news.
see it
You
fly
see
over.
it, and went right over the house sort of thing, did
Yeah.
it?
Yeah,
And
right over the fields, and you know, it's
along Pittwater.
1:30 p.m. February 19th, the Stinson monoplane took off from Brisbane bound for Sydney, but never reached its destination. In bad weather, the plane disappeared somewhere over Lannington National Park in the Macpherson Ranges of southeastern Queensland. A sparsely populated mountainous area, dozens of search parties fought their way through the jungle country. As the days passed, hopes of finding survivors dwindled. The crew of 2 and 5 passengers were given up for dead. But the search continued. Until on the 10th day, a local bushman, Bernard O'Reilly, playing a hunch, sighted a scar on a distant hillside. On he struggled to find amid the wreckage of the Stinson 2 men, J.S. Proud and J.R. Binstead, alive but only just. Proud with a smashed leg, Binstead on the verge of collapse from exposure and exhaustion. 5 had died in the crash, but 2 survived in a miracle of the mountains, performed by bushman Bernard O'Reilly.
so it was newspaper delivery, you know.
Okay.
Took the newspapers, yeah.
Which brings me on to another thing. The delivery of the milk. I remember as a little boy, the horse and cart and the billy on the fence post.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
I didn't get it out. The milk carters delivered the milk, and it was arranged that everybody hung their billy on the paling fence, and so the milkman would come along with his, what they called a bottle can, which was about 2 gallons, and a quart measure under their arm, and they would measure the milk out and pour it into the billies.
And the money would be hidden under the billy, I suppose.
Well, there used to be a collection day once a week, and somebody would go and collect the money.
Was it a good living for your family or not? Or was it a bit of a
Wonderful
struggle?
living.
Yeah.
We weren't unhappy in any way. We were very happy.
Even in the Depression, you still had the milk and cream and...
Yeah. One thing I must tell you, we used to have tokens, milk tokens and tea and sugar and different foods.
During the war.
Yes,
And after the war too, I suppose.
during the war. And my father knew where he could get extra, and he would get extra food on the black market. And there was a local policeman who was very happy to accept the black market food.
What was his name, Mum?
No, I don't tell his name.
The long arm of the law might reach out again, eh?
But on the milk cart, it had raw milk. It wasn't pasteurised.
So you delivered twice a day and there wasn't any form of refrigeration or ice involved in the process at all?
No, but when my father got the refrigerator, it was a box one that you open up like that. And it had a great big cylinder with water and a chemical in it. And it had kerosene lamps under it. And you pull them out in the night and light them up and push them back under. And all night long the chemical would rise to the lid and drip down, drop, 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 all night. And my father could put quite a few bottle cans in with milk in it to keep cold, so it was a big, really good thing.
Where was the benefit for your family?
Well, it kept the milk much longer and better, icy cold milk. And when we moved up to the top house and had a new dairy up there and had milking machines, everything was much better, and we had a cooling system, and the milk would run down and keep cold as it went. And people would come from everywhere to taste the icy cold milk as it came off the cooling system.
So you were ahead of the rest of the area.
Yes. And Captain Gordon Taylor came, and Dad was very friendly with him, and he used to come and taste milk, icy cold milk, and used to come,
make afternoon tea for him.
He used to come down to the house, and I'd make him and his wife a cup of tea. That happened quite a lot.
Now this is Captain Gordon Taylor from?
Who went with Smithy and had to climb along the plane's wing.
Part of the plane's exhaust carried away, shattering the starboard propeller. 400 miles to sea over the Tasman, Bill Taylor, climbing out on this tiny strut, drained oil from the disabled engine into a thermos flask. He then passed it back through the window, where it was emptied into a suitcase before being transferred to the port engine, which was badly overheating because of the extra strain. In the whistling slipstream, spilt oil splashed along the fuselage. For 30 minutes it was a gamble with death, but the old bus limped home to Mascot, the dead engine mute evidence of a near disaster. Bill Taylor had undoubtedly saved the day and was awarded the George Medal for his gallantry. Smithy, then the world's greatest airman, and navigator co-pilot Bill Taylor had done it again.
I bet Gordon Taylor had an eye for a pretty girl.
I bet he did.
They started the school at Logan Valley, didn't they?
Yes, she was a school teacher.
That's Mrs. Taylor?
Yeah. They lived in a house called The Shack, just opposite the Logan Valley School.
Up on the rise, wasn't it?
Yes. And he used to fly the flying boats, and he started the trip to Lord Howe Island. And he used to be coming home at night, and he'd decide whether he'd stay in the city when he flew in, or whether he'd come back home in the night, and he would dip his wing one way or the other. So my father sold the dairy in 1950.
And that was the end of the dairy operation or not?
Yes.
They closed the dairy down?
Yeah.
So Warringah Shire Council decided to resume this land?
Yes.
Which was your land or?
Was my father's.
Your father's land.
And we lived there for about 18 years. They shouldn't have ever resumed it, but we didn't know the facts at the time. But when we did know, we tried to get something done about it. But
because it was resumed for private development, wasn't it?
yes,
Hotels, motels,
Yeah.
marinas.
supposed to be Pacific paradise.
But not for your family. Quite the opposite.
They had been sending me a letter once a fortnight to vacate the place. And when My father died in 1966. They decided they'd swoop on us.
And they is Warringah Shire Council.
Yeah.
And what happened?
Makes me sick to think about it.
Soon after buying the dairy at Mona and Bassett Streets in 1936, Joseph Homer bought 5 lots of land across the road on what is now Winnererremy Bay Park, lots 1, 2 and 48 in Huxley Street, and lots 8 and 9 in Spencer Street, a road that was never built, while Huxley and Darwin Streets no longer exist. There were houses on 3 of the blocks, one of which was occupied by Dorothy and her family from 1950. Dorothy's sister Grace lived in another with her family. The third house unfortunately burnt down. In 1958, Warringah Shire Council put a resumption order on all of this land through to the Pittwater foreshore. It called for tenders to develop the land and the waterfront. An outfit called Pacific Paradise was granted a 99-year lease in conjunction with Warringah Shire Council. There would be a 250-boat marina, an 8-storey tourist hotel, a shopping centre, Olympic swimming pool and a large car park. Dorothy repeatedly received threatening official letters to vacate, but she sat tight. Foreshore lots owned by the Halverson Boat Company were quickly resumed, and Warringah Council proceeded to cut down hundreds of mature mangroves. Pacific Paradise then dredged the bay, piling reclaimed sand adjacent to Dorothy's and Grace's homes. At various times their properties were flooded or inundated with fleas and sandflies. When Joseph died in 1966, he left his 5 blocks of Centenary Estate Land to Dorothy and Grace. Warringah Shire Council then ramped up the eviction threats. On the 1st of April 1968, April Fool's Day, the sheriff arrived to enforce the eviction, saying he had a furniture truck on the street for their possessions and he'd get them out and padlock the property. Dorothy and her 5 children were the last to leave because they hadn't received any compensation. They also had to find homes for their hundreds of small farm animals. Just a few months before, in 1967, 2 Warringah councillors had been jailed for taking bribes from a development company, and the council had been dismissed. So it's not surprising that when compensation did arrive for Dorothy, it was minimal. She and her sister Grace each received a Warringah Council cheque for $725. Warringah Council paid just $1,450 for 5 blocks of land in a prime position. That's $290 a block. Director Rob Sitch made a fine comedy called The Castle, based on the attempted resumption of Daniel Kerrigan's family home.
This is a compulsory acquisition.
And the notion that a man's home is his castle. But for Dorothy the truth was otherwise, with a rogue council beating up on a woman and her children, evicting them into the street, and then paying a derisory compensation. In fact, as this 1967 article attests, the Pacific Paradise land was worth at least $520,000, equating to around $5,000 per block, not $290. Tell them they're dreaming indeed.
The compensation monies paid to the property owners was the value of the properties at the time they were first resumed, in 1958, 10 years earlier. This was insufficient to purchase another property. Pacific Paradise went broke. Another company took over and they also pulled out. The land then stayed idle for 32 years, much to our family's disgust. Our land and homes meant a great deal to us. We had an idyllic childhood growing up on a small farm with a menagerie of animals, riding our horses, building cubbies in the bush, blackberry picking and playing with our cousins. This event devastated our families, and to this day Dorothy finds it difficult to talk about without becoming upset.